Hi, my name's Charlie Barnhart, and I'm hosting this roundtable today about the implications of regionalization. This is the trend we talk about where we build in the region for the region. So this is a solution that this industry really started from and really evolved out of as we went to cross-hemispheric solutions around the world. Originally, the consumers and producers of electronic manufacturing services really did this on a regionalized basis. They built in the region for the region. So what we've been tracking since 2008 here at Charlie Barnhart Associates is really a migration of work that originally flooded into China in the early 2000s and has really started to flow back into local or regional low-cost kind of alternatives in North America and Europe. While this flow really hasn't reached tidal, this counterflow hasn't reached tidal proportions, it's gained a huge amount of traction over the last 6 to 7 quarters, and we're forecasting that over the same period of time going forward that it'll continue to escalate. So there's a lot of reasons for this. We have escalating inflationary pressure in Southeast Asia and China. Prices are really a function of cost, right? And so as underlying costs go up, prices have to go up. We know that the energy market is a big geopolitical issue. We know that oil is going up. We know that there's problems in the world today about energy. And we know that it's going to continue to be a real problem that needs to be addressed. Logistic costs have more than doubled over the last few years, And then lastly, there's this issue with the ODM community, which is primarily centered in China, in Taiwan and China. And they're really walking away from the electronic manufacturing services business. They really don't want to do it anymore. They're frustrated with the prices and with the pressure that OEMs have applied to them to really drive these costs down, and they're just going, I'm not going to do this for that price anymore. And so we see that this whole sector of the electronic manufacturing services business is removing itself out from play. And so we think that this trend is going to continue. It's inevitable, and that gives us some very tough questions that we're going to have to answer. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of go through, we have 3 questions, and I'd like to have an opportunity here for each one of you to at least initiate the dialogue about each one. So Steve, if you wouldn't mind going first. So the question is, how is the global industry going to deal with the fact that we've taken the entire downstream supply chain and concentrated it basically in China, a little bit in Southeast Asia, but basically in China. So when the business is coming back out of China, back to regional solutions, or new business doesn't go to China and goes to regional solutions, let's say, hypothetically. What about the supply chain? All the component manufacturers, fabrication, what are we going to do about that? Because all the parts are still there.
Right.
Yeah, so how does that work?
We're actually struggling with that right now. We won our first award from a supplier. We have a customer that is in the U.S., who's selling in the U.S., and they traditionally contract out in Asia. And we won our first award of building their product in Mexico to source into the U.S. It's a new product, so it's coming out with a new product introduction, but most of their supply chain is in Asia. So what we're doing is, on the easy stuff, we're converting it over, so the passives and things like that. The other products, like, say, plastics, which are sourced in other, we're kind of forced right now to take it in as it is and have that long supply chain moving into our facility until we can move it into other suppliers in Mexico. So it is kind of a messy transition right now, but it's something that we have to do because it is all over there, and that's just the way they're set up.
Okay, that's good. That's interesting, and that's pretty current. That's happened in the last little bit here.
Last couple of months.
Couple of months, right?
Yes, yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you sharing that with us. But it also kind of leads us into the next question that maybe you'd like to take, Brian.
Sure.
Okay. And so this one is related to the risk. So who's going to end up absorbing all the underlying costs and risks that we just kind of heard as exemplified by that case study when these cross-hemispheric solutions remigrate to regional?
Well, I look at it like this. I mean, 12 years ago when this migration started away from the Americas and away from Europe into China, the business justification for these things was pretty straightforward. You were going to save money because the labor was cheaper. So the labor rates have gone up, as you mentioned. So what's the business case now to move it back? And it's a little bit more nebulous because it's a hard thing to prove you've got a return on investment when you're Foxconn. You need to put a $12 billion investment into Brazil, for example, which is something that they're in the process of doing right now. Ultimately, the guy who's going to pay for it is the consumer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The prices are going to have to lift a little bit to compensate for this. But if you're Apple, if you're HP, you want your supply chain to be rock solid, and you want to tighten up the distance between where it's made and where it's sold. So there's real value in closing the distance between where it's made and where it's sold, logistically, time to market. If they're out of stock on something, you have to wait 6-8 weeks for it to come in from your Asian supplier, and it can be there in a few weeks if it's built in Mexico or Brazil, for example. That's a big difference to the market and to the OEM that's trying to sell these products.
That's a really good point, yeah. So, do you, in your business, let's say, you look across the industry pretty broadly, you guys do, at DEC, and do you see, from a risk perspective, do you see that by making these transitions that you'll be able to support it? Because I know there's an awful lot of support activities and field service kind of stuff that goes along with this, right?
Right.
And so you guys are got to be right in the middle of that, right? What we're going to do, how we're going to do it.
Well, we have to have people where our customers are.
Right. Exactly,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my role at DEC is to be responsible for the Americas. It's sales, service, installation, and those sorts of functions. And 10 years ago, there wasn't a tremendous market in Brazil, and there was probably zero market in Argentina. Yet we've had to develop those channels and make sure we have people on the ground that are capable of supporting the DEC brand, doing the installation, spare parts, those sorts of things.
Right.
And so as the market changes, the market shifts, we have to adjust our business model to support it.
Absolutely. I understand. Good. That's good. Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And then last but by no means least, actually that's very interesting about Argentina and Brazil. That's very interesting insights. And they're also kind of lead us into the next question, actually, for Alicia. And so the question is, which geographies are going to be the winners and which geographies are going to be the losers? Not that anybody really, wins or loses, but, clearly as things migrate around the world, it's going to go from someplace to someplace, and it's not going to all change, and it's certainly not going to change overnight, but there is going to be a flow in and out. And, Argentina is just a great example. It's been off the radar forever, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, and so what do you think? I mean, what do you see? What's your perspective on that?
Well, what we see mostly is we do have customers that are asking about Mexico and wanting to, right now we're quoting, and but mostly what we're doing is we are working with the China solution. Even though Mexico is something that everyone's wanting to come back, build and do their MPI in the US and do the nearshore manufacturing, I think that in regards to winners and losers, it's hard to answer. It could be Europe, it could be Mexico, ultimately it could be China. But that's just the trend that I see today.
So in Europe, do you see Eastern Europe versus Western Europe? I mean, do you have any sense relative to where you think we'll see some migration to in Eastern Europe or Western Europe? I mean, do people ask about specific places when you talk about Europe?
They don't really for me because I'm based out of U.S., so I see a lot of that. We do have a facility in Europe, in Switzerland, so I'm not sure exactly. I know that there is a lot that they're working with directly. We just don't see it on our end. Most of the stuff that we see, the trends are mostly Mexico and or China. And then I have heard some new discussions in regards to Brazil here, talking with some customers lately because of the globalization with the manufacturing but mostly China probably ultimately.
Okay, cool. Well, good. Thank you all very much, and I really appreciate it. I think that was very insightful, and let me congratulate you each and wish you a very, very good show here at IPC Apex.